Good morning, this is Angela with Parkrose Permaculture. It's been a few days since I made a video. I've been super busy in my real life. Not that permaculture is not real life, but I mean in my non-digital life. Been very busy in the garden, very busy with family obligations, but I noticed a topic that crept up multiple times in some agroforestry and regenerative ag groups that I'm in. And I have some expertise on this issue, and I thought that I would talk about it and hope that it might be helpful for you in your food forest. So when we purchased this property 11 years ago, there were 2 trees on the property. A split ornamental plum, which we immediately had removed because it was a danger. It was also in the very middle of the garden. And this squirrel planted hazel, which I let live because it seemed to be really happy and thriving. And I initially thought I will get nuts off of this tree. I love hazelnuts. They are native here in Oregon. They're a sustainable, easy to grow crop here. Unfortunately, it hasn't turned out that way because I don't net the tree. I don't get very many hazelnuts off of it because the squirrels get 90% of them. But this tree has many other uses, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. I use it for firewood. Hazel burns hot and long, and we have a small wood stove that can handle small wood. It also is really good for garden stakes and walking sticks and things like that, because as you can see, the hazel grows these very straight stakes. Now, this doesn't look that much like a tree, and that is because I coppice it. So the question that keeps coming up in these agroforestry groups is, who here coppices their wood? What wood can you coppice? What are the uses of coppiced wood? So I wanted to share my experience with over a decade of coppicing the one tree in my yard that I'm able to coppice. I do have some pollarded trees, which is a separate issue, different technique for managing trees. But coppicing is a technique that basically can make your trees immortal. So let's go in here in this part of the garden. Now, I've had the chickens in this part of the run, and I kicked them out about, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. And so they've cleaned up everything in here, and now you can see all of the seeds that have been broadcast in here are starting to germinate. So my hope is that the cover crops and things, lots of brassicas and clover and vetch and things will start to germinate in here, and then I'll let the chickens back in. So that is the kind of context in which this hazel grows. So coppicing is when you take a tree and you cut off the trunks down low, and you do it to create what is called a stool. And let's get in here. It's a little spidery this time of year. So if we get down into the tree, you can see that you are creating a stool down low here where I'm cutting off the branches. So you can see one that I cut back a few years ago right here. I'm cutting off the trunks of the tree to create this branching effect where you get a shrub-like growth of a multi-stemmed tree. Now, why do you want to do this? Like I said, it basically can make the tree immortal. A normal hazel can live for 80 to 120 years. There are coppiced hazelnuts in Europe that are almost 1,000 years old. It regenerates the tree, much like pruning your roses or, when you finish your green beans, when they're done flowering, you can pinch them back and they regenerate. When you prune a plant, it encourages new growth. It mimics browsers and grazers in nature, those kind of mammals that don't exist in most permaculture gardens. It mimics that behavior and stimulates new growth. So when you coppice, you have this stool where you cut off down low you can choose the height of your stool. Some people do about 8 inches. Some people who don't want to reach down as low do 18 to 24 inches. I have mine about 1 foot off the ground. And what I do is the largest branches in a given year, I come and I remove them. And I work across the tree. So you see all of these stems of various sizes. I take the largest ones from 1/3 to 1/2 of the tree. So this year I will come in the fall and I will take all of these larger ones here, particularly at the base. They tend to be Usually when I cut them, they tend to be the width of my forearm or even my upper arm. And then those I cut up and I use as firewood. These smaller ones here, which are nice and straight, make great supports or walking sticks. They make great garden supports because when you coppice most trees, it encourages the production of very straight growth. There are some exceptions. Red oak is one where when you coppice it, it tends to create curved branches, but for the most part, they send up very straight shoots. So next year I will come and I will remove the ones on the other side. And the reason that I do that is because I want to maintain some of the canopy here. This is a canopy layer tree for me. I want to maintain some of that canopy layer so I don't shear the plant to the ground. Some folks, when they coppice a tree, they come in every 4 or 5 years and they just cut the entire stool off, no matter what the diameter of the branch is. This is much more, my technique is much more like selective timber cutting, right? So when you go into a forest and instead of clear cutting, you go in and you selectively harvest the big black walnut trees that you want for your firewood, or maple trees and that you want for timber or firewood, instead of clear cutting an area. So that's how I view this kind of coppicing. I go in and with a hand pruner, I selectively remove the largest stakes from part of the tree, and those become my firewood and my supports in the garden. There's no right or wrong way. If you want to preserve that canopy, you remove 1/3 to 1/2 of the stakes every year. If you want to have a less labor-intensive method, you can just take a chainsaw and cut the entire thing off at the stool once every 4 to 5 years. Here are my tools that I really like for coppicing. Hand pruners for removing the side shoots. I really like my curved pruning saw, and then also I use a hatchet as I am removing some of those side branches. Sometimes a hatchet is just the most efficient. So when I say side branches, I mean, come in here, this is the stake I want to keep. These little guys here off to the side. These and these. And this stickwood I definitely save and use as kindling. So in doing this, I'm creating this multi-stemmed tree that basically is immortal, produces firewood sustainably. I don't have to kill the tree to get firewood. Off this one tree, I get about 2 weeks worth of firewood every year. So it is not, it's not like it's going to heat my house all winter, but it does provide a significant amount of kindling, and it does provide about 2 weeks worth of firewood. If I had a whole stand of this, obviously I could cut all the firewood I need for my entire winter's usage. However, I'm able to get plenty of free firewood off of Craigslist. So it's not like I have to grow all my own firewood. In my city, trees are being removed all the time, and using that as firewood saves the wood from going to the dump. Just keeping things out of the landfill. So what do you do with all the leaves when you coppice? Now you can wait until fall, until the tree is completely denuded, and you can harvest the coppice wood then. I actually like to do it when there's still leaves on, and then I strip the leaves, which strip really easily, and hazel leaves are nice and pretty soft, and I use these as bedding in the duck house and the chicken coop so that no part of this tree is wasted. I get some nuts, also feed the squirrels, but I get some nuts off of this tree. I get wood for stakes and supports in the garden. I get firewood. I get free bedding for my duck house and my chicken coop. So I do absolutely nothing for this tree. I don't water it. I don't fertilize it other than the chickens drop their manure. It's a native tree, provides native habitat. So if you don't have hazel where you live, what else can you coppice? What else works really well for coppice? So in terms of firewood, you can coppice red oak. Like I said, it tends to produce more curved stakes and not these beautiful straight stakes like the hazel. You can coppice birch, which is not a high BTU, but it coppices very well. Also produces straight stakes. You can coppice dogwood. In fact, a lot of folks do it on purpose because the new shoots that come up tend to be bright green or bright red, depending on the type of dogwood. Create a lovely shrub that way. You can coppice willow in the garden, which is great because willow is really good for stakes and creating arbors. You can coppice mulberry. Now, like I said, I pollard my mulberries. I can do a video on that later, but mulberry is also not a super high BTU wood, but it does coppice very nicely, and that can be beneficial if you want to keep the mulberries closer to the ground. You also coppice trees because you create this broad, wide look starting low down, right? You're not having one or two trunks and then a high canopy. You are creating a better hedge plant. So if you're looking to put in a hedgerow or a privacy screen, consider some of the sustainable native trees that do well with coppicing and turn them into a free, endless source of biomass or fuel, and also create a privacy screen so that there is foliage the entire way up the plant. And it creates a lot more privacy for you. Also creates a lot of shade for your livestock. Great shade plant for my poultry. They often will come and nap down under here. So that's a little bit about coppicing hazel, why I grow hazel, why I let a squirrel planted hazel exist in my yard. If you are into permaculture and you need to heat your house with wood, coppice is a sustainable way to produce firewood. It is sustainable agroforestry. It is sustainable fuel production. Now, I only have a 1/4 acre, so I'm not able to grow a whole grove of these. But if you have access to more land and space and you want to consider a way to produce your own firewood without killing the tree, and actually with helping your tree become basically immortal, increase the health and vigor of your tree, consider coppicing. It's sort of a lost technique, but one that definitely needs to be embraced and reconsidered as we look at sustainable methods for fuel production in permaculture and in regenerative agriculture. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.